Thanks to MedJet for supporting the Lady Business podcast. If you're hospitalized or your security is threatened while traveling, they can get you home. I'm a MedJet member and have been for years. Everyone who travels should be. Enroll before your next trip at medjet.com.
A lot of women do a lot of things themselves and they're not building their team. And this is, you cannot do everything yourself, especially if you're the CEO. You need to start to scale, you need to start handing off and get people who hopefully can do these things better than you, that you're thinking you're holding the vision of the business.
Welcome to Taking Care of Lady Business, where we get real about what it takes to succeed, whether it's in business, life, or both. I'm talking to game-changing and visionary women who've broken barriers, built empires, and redefined success on their own terms. They'll share their strategies, secrets, and the no BS advice you need to rise to the top. I'm your host, Jennifer Justice, also known as JJ. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. I'm Jennifer Justice. Today we have Beth Ferreira. She is a general partner at Serena Ventures. And if you're not familiar with Serena Ventures, the Serena is Serena Williams. And I'm pretty sure you've all heard about her. So great to have you on today, Beth.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You were one of our very first guests on Taking Care of Lady Business, hundreds of thousands of downloads ago, which I'm happy to say. I just wanted to make sure that your voice is really heard and what you're doing, in particular now, as we know that if you've been following anything about female founders and female founded companies and venture funding, it's actually gone down instead of up, which is not at all what anybody would have predicted. And so I think it's such a crucial time to have you on here. So thank you for being here.
No, I wish it was on a better topic, but yes.
Well, I think the whole point of this is to, see how we can do things and build our own, you know what I mean? What you're looking for, mistakes we're making, et cetera. So, let's get into a little bit of your background. I think everybody wonders how VCs in particular get into being a VC, since it's not like, let's go to VC school. Yeah.
So I was very lucky in early in my career to find a venture firm called Flatiron Partners, and I joined there right before the dot-com boom, right as the dot-com boom was happening and through the bust. And so that sort of informed the rest of.
And that's like the late 90s, early 2000s kind of
Exactly.
situation.
I joined in 98 and I left in 2002. And we got to see a lot there. It was like one of the first firms that were focused on the internet. And the internet was a thesis, is like, okay, there's this like huge technology that come about, and what are the businesses that you could build on top of it? And obviously we've evolved from there. And then the bus made me think like, oh wait, I need to get some skills that I could like like also run a business, like things like that. So I decided to go to the operating side, and I did that for a little under a decade. So my first job was at Etsy, when Etsy was this small craft startup in Brooklyn, and everyone thought I lost my mind. I went there as the 12th employee. So we did, a bunch of, creating processes and building the business over time. And that is just a continual iteration of that when you're that early. And then I did it again at a company called fab.com that didn't have as good of an outcome as Etsy. And then after that, I sat back and I was like, okay, do I have another one of these in me? And I actually did, but I was sitting in New York and there wasn't, at the time, companies I was really excited to join. And so ended up deciding to go back to the venture side. And the first stop was partnering with what was then William Morris Endeavor, the talent agency, now Endeavor. They were half of the capital in our fund. To create a fund, they were half the capital in our fund. And then we raised outside capital. And that was great because it was, it was less about talent than the the relationships that the organization had, and we were able to leverage those, whether they were with Fortune 500 companies or whether with individuals, to support our companies and like be very differentiated. And then after that, I went to a firm that I knew for a very long time, almost my entire career, called Firstmark Capital, which is a great fund here in New York, and Series A, and did a lot of great stuff there. But at the end of it, you sort of think about, well, do I want to keep continuing to do what I'm doing here in the types of businesses that, as my worlds got smaller and smaller, that we had to, those are the type of businesses that I could get done in that sort of environment, or is there something else that we could be doing? And I had met Serena when I was at WME. We had co-invested. She had been investing her own capital at that time. And towards the end of her tennis career, she started a fund called, which she named Serena Ventures, and she raised $111 million, which is pretty incredible. And the genesis of that was like, she heard this number, and before, it was 2% of capital goes to women, and there was less than 7% of venture capitalist check writers were women. And she was like, that cannot be right. And once she found that out, she was like, we have to do something about this. And so that underlying mission was something that was just so exciting. So anyway, I started as an advisor to the fund, and then ultimately came over.
Wow, amazing. So, I mean, there are a lot of like connections, et cetera. My favorite though is you're like after your first VC and you're like, I need some skills because that
I hate to say that, but it's true.
I need to know how to do something. Let me ask you though, let's go back a little. I mean, Etsy, everyone obviously knows Etsy and how crazy, everyone wants to be one of those. I want to be a startup, the 12th employee of an Etsy and Uber or whatever, or Pinterest. But I do remember Fab being really big and being really popular and being served like ads for it all the time. And what was the difference between an Etsy and a Fab that made Etsy super successful and Fab not?
I think it's the power of the business model. So you have Etsy tapped into this community and user base that was just so excited to have an outlet. It was like a badge of honor to be an Etsy seller, even if you never sold a thing. And the power of that, and also it was a true marketplace. So you could buy directly to the seller. Etsy had very little intervention between that.
Mhm.
Right now we see a lot of managed marketplaces where the business gets really, really involved. So it was a natural, like, yes, of course this works. And the demand, like, people say, well, what do people buy? Can they, buy, at the time it was like, well, how big could this market get? Like but it's infinite because anything can be handmade. And so it was across all these different categories. And you had the sellers on the platform as your natural ambassadors. And so they're bringing people to their site or their Etsy shop, but they're also bringing them to Etsy as a whole. And so I think there was like this underlying ethos and community around it. It was almost like a movement of like, let's bring this back.
It's cultish, yeah.
Yeah. And also I joke, but it's kind of true that we made a lot of mistakes early, and there was a lot of changes of management, and we couldn't kill them. We couldn't kill the company. We came, we really, and so that's the power of the business model.
Yeah,
And I'd say
true.
like for Fab should have been successful. We were profitable in the US. We had a customer base that loved the product. When I asked people, what have you bought on Etsy? And they would say one or two things. When I would ask someone from Fab, they would say, they would list a bunch of things
Right.
because
And Fab was just a collection of really cool things that you could buy. Like, and
exactly.
and did Fab make their own stuff or no?
So originally, no.
Okay.
But as we evolved, we started to see that some categories of products were just flying off the shelves. Like at the time, those ottoman poof things
Yeah.
were really hot. So then we just made them in colors that no one ever made them in before.
Yeah.
So, and and those sold. And then we decided to do furniture, which kind of turned out to be a train wreck because they were all glued together and we put them in a warehouse in New Jersey and they all melted. But anyway, uh, it was really about the ambition of the founder and really the board thinking that this could be the biggest company or the fastest growing company ever, and that we're doing everything in our power to do that. And in just in an e-commerce business is just a very hard thing to do. So we launched in Europe and spent a lot of money in Europe. And Europe didn't do anything wrong. It's just a flawed strategy because you can't just like chase after revenue like that.
Yeah. So I guess you got skills from those two companies, right?
Yeah, I definitely learned how to manage.
All right. So cut to you're now at Serena Ventures, and you were saying some statistics that when Serena and why she started her company, like what was the percentage then for investing in female founders?
I think it was about 2% when she
You
did
think it
it.
was still 2%? I thought it was a little bit more.
Or maybe 2.5%,
Yeah.
because it's been hovering. I mean, I feel like it's been hovering at the same number for a while, and now it's like slowly ticking down.
So, but there's more than 7% of female VCs, right? Now?
Well, so the question is, are they real check writers or not?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that number is a little bit hard to quantify because
Hmm.
it's hard because the titles don't indicate whether or not they're real check writers or not. So I think the number is less than that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so dismal. I mean, since we've been, I think at the height, like there was like, it was like 3.7, invested in female founded companies. There's more female founded companies by the day. What are you seeing in the marketplace now? I know what happens is a lot of female founded companies expect female VCs to invest in them, but you can't always just rely on that for many reasons. You want to talk a little bit about that?
There's no shortage of women starting companies right now. I think that they are generally bootstrapped for longer. They generally, when they raise capital, they're raising less capital than their male counterparts. And in some ways, it's, I don't want to say it's a blessing, but it's a huge forcing function to be very focused and very efficient, which ultimately will serve them well long term. But capital is important, and you need capital to grow and develop your product and develop additional services and products that you're going to sell to your existing customer base. And so that generally puts women at a disadvantage. And it's not just women, it's like anyone in another category. And so we're definitely seeing that, and we're seeing that they're definitely raising slower. But we do, I mean, like our portfolio is 70% women and people of color, and we're seeing positive trends within our portfolio, which is good, but we're a microcosm of picking from lots of people who are not getting capital.
Yeah. What is the trend that you're seeing?
That they're in I think the number of the percent of capital is a tricky number because there is a bit of the haves and the have-nots right now. So women weren't, when they first started calculating this number, women weren't raising 50 million or 100 million dollars rounds,
Right.
and now they are. So now you have that. Now, even though the pool capital is increasing, you also have those larger rounds sort of skewing the data a little bit.
Right. Okay. I got it. And
Mhm.
so at Serena Ventures, what, like, all VCs focus on certain categories, right, of businesses. What's your focus there?
Well, I mean, a lot of what we look at is businesses that empower individuals. So whether it's in health and wellness. We have a company called Azuzu in the fintech category where it enables people who are paying rent to create credit. And so, and now because they have this credit, they can, of this credit score, they can now have access to financial products that they didn't have before, whether it's to buy their first home with a mortgage or, a car loan and things like that, which they didn't have access before. So that extends to other products and services, whether it's, cervical cancer testing at home to make it easier for women to have access to that, because there's a surprising number of women that don't get tested every year. And then also small and medium sized businesses. Like most of those small and medium sized businesses are run by women and minorities. And we look at businesses that are enabling them to compete with the bigger platforms. So whether that's on the supply chain side or helping to manage their internal systems and processes. Serena likes to say we are in the business of finding companies that help everyday people. But that's sort of the mission of what we're doing.
I love it. How long has it been around now? Would you say
the fund was launched in 2021 while she was still playing tennis, which is incredible.
Yeah.
It's been a little over 3 years since they started to deploy capital.
Yeah.
We have lots of super interesting companies and, some micro lending. We have a company that is called Rebel that enables, they basically take the returns that we're going to landfill and reselling them. They started in the baby category and now they're in home and they're going to expand to other businesses, but they're taking that problem off the plate of brands and retailers. And also, and they're getting paid to do that. So they're solving a huge problem for the business side. And then from the consumer side, they're getting products that they never would have gotten on discounted.
What's the name of that company?
It's called Rebel.
Rebel?
Yeah. Rebel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, what a simple name, man. I love it.
Yeah.
And apropos. So, when women are starting these businesses, what are some hard truths that they need to hear about raising capital?
So the venture capital model is you have to believe that any company that you're investing in is going to return your whole fund. So if I buy 10%, if I invest 10 and I get 10% of your company and I have $100 million fund, I need to generate $100 million from that investment. So that means that you have to be X, worth, if you're worth 100 million today, you need to be worth $1 billion for that to work.
And in what period of time?
Yeah, we're probably more because you're going to raise more capital and I'm going to get diluted. So I still have to generate that much capital or that much return. And I think that's the first disconnect. I think people, I think particularly women don't understand. And there's two things. One, to make sure that your business can do that. And then the second, which I think is where people get tripped up, is I don't want to say things that I'm not going to do. And so I want to hit all my numbers. And not that you want to pretend that the numbers are really big, but you have to spend the time to think about what does it take to get to that big number and what do we have to do? And that might be raising more capital in 2 years at another milestone or whatever. But you have to be able to say, this is going to be an enormous business. This is going to be world changing. And, you want to be on this vision with me or this journey with me.
I've actually never heard anybody explain it like that. And I'm around VC. I know so many of you. I've never. So, but VC doesn't typically invest in $100 million company though, right?
No, but I mean, but even if you are, a 20 million, $10 or $20 million company,
right?
Even that idea that, okay, if you're going on the VC path, you're going to need more capital in order to continue to grow. I'm putting capital in now. I have to believe, and that I'm going to get diluted maybe 40 or 50% over time. I still have to believe that that capital is going to return the whole fund.
Right. So simple math. You invest $1 million in a $10 million company, over time. So if they never took another dime, right, which is unlikely if it's a VC growth kind of company, that they're going to have to exit for 100 million. But it's more likely that they're going to have to exit if you never put in any more money and get diluted, like 500 million, if I'm doing that math right.
Yeah. So in that case, right, if I put 1 million and $10 million rounds, I own, a little less than 10% post, or just say it's post, right? So it's 10%. That needs to be much bigger. It needs to be closer to a billion because I own 10% of the total. And so when you think about the growth from the $10 million round to the $1 billion round in order to return my whole fund, because that's when I get $100 million. It's a huge, huge, the expectations are huge. And also, you also have to think about whether or not you want venture capital around you. Because I think, like, particularly when people are creating brands take time to build. VCs don't have time. They have, a 10 to 12 year horizon that they need to return their capital. And so thinking about who the right investors are for you, those might be people who understand the industry or super angels that are more patient, or potentially family offices in the space that understand the space and could be a strategic partner for you. Because venture capitalists can come on your board and, force you to do, not force, but like encourage you to do things that you may not want to do or might not be the best for the company in order to chase growth.
Because they have that kind of power.
Yeah, because they're, they might be on your board or
Explain that a little bit. Let's talk about that. So I want people to, I want, the listener to understand that it's like you can go out and get venture capital money, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you do it. I've represented, a few women who founded companies and were kicked off their board, kicked out of their company by their VC board members, you know? Not like
yes.
everything has to be a downer. There's some good things about it, but they have to
Yeah, look,
understand.
this is why you want to spend time with your potential investors. It is harder to get rid of your investors than it is to get a divorce. And so, so you're
And a
stuck with
divorce
them
isn't
for a
easy.
really long time. And you want to make sure that, look, like they have their interests and they have to, make money, but they also want people who want to be on the journey with you and want to help you succeed and have the ability to help you succeed. And sometimes you don't have the luxury of picking because dollars are scarce. But if you do, like, spend a lot of time, I'm always surprised by the number of founders who don't want to meet me in person. They're like, oh yeah, we can do this all over Zoom. And I'm like, this is a way bigger decision for you than it is for me. Right. And so you need to get to know them. You need to see them eye to eye. And like, is this someone that's going to solve problems with me? Is this person the one that I'm going to want to call when something goes wrong? Are they going to, really help me through those things? And like, nothing is all, straight and up to the right. There's always something that's going to go wrong in an early stage company, or, huge challenges that you didn't expect. So you need that help.
And what is the ratio that a VC uses that says, like, if I invest in this many companies, one of them is going to hit, or how many are going to hit? What is that percentage?
I mean, the rule of thumb is for an early stage venture fund is like a third return the fund. So maybe you have like one really big one, but they're, a third are really good companies. A third are sort of in the middle. They, might have they either return capital or, it's like 1.5 or 2x. And then there is the rest who, are going to zero or essentially zero.
Wow. So you can get some money, doesn't mean you're going to go to exit. Well, an exit with a zero instead.
Exactly.
Oh my. What do you think? I mean, is there a trend of the ones who go to zero? Like what do you think are the main triggers there?
what are the main triggers to
Or
the
maybe
ones?
we can do the more positive approach. What are the ones that really succeed?
Yeah, I think it is being very real about product market fit. And so your original idea, especially at the early stages, might not be the one that you end up with. And that might be small tweaks or it might be a complete pivot. But I see founders just so holding on to the idea. And I'm like, I'm going to make this idea work, even when all of the indications show that customers or users don't want are not using the product. And I have a for example, we have I'm working with a founder right now who it was very clear that there was no product market fit, over a year ago. And for me, I thought for him, like it was a better use of his time to do something else versus like figure out how this is going to work. And it's okay to return capital to your investors. It's not failure. It's well, I mean, it is, but it's better to recognize it early versus not. And this is probably a founder we would have backed again, but with a different idea. But now, like fast forward, month over month revenue is less than it was then. And so, it only proved out that there's no way it can work and they can't raise capital. So that's like, one instance. And I was just too married to the product that you built.
How do you get that far to not have a like that you can go and you can raise money from VC and not have a product market fit? How do you get that far and convince people to give you money?
It's the dream, right? So when you're raising your first capital, a lot of times it's just an idea on a PowerPoint.
A deck
And
and a
so
dream.
the deck and a dream. And so, the idea is like, oh, wait, like this person is really compelling. They have, the right background to go after this. They're doing it for the right reasons. And wow, this is a huge market that they're going after is, basically the analysis for that. But then once you launch, you have metrics. And
Yeah.
that's
And it's like
right?
nobody wants to use you.
You gotta, then you have to start to perform and tell the story through numbers, and that sometimes gets challenging.
Yeah. Sounds like it. So what are the trends that are happening that you're seeing now? I mean, everybody's talking about AI, right? Like, is that to have to be a component of somebody's business now? Or is that just it, a trend?
I do think it is a massive shift in the industry. Whether or not your business has to be quote an AI business is, still remains to be seen. But it's hard for me to see that businesses won't be using AI in some way to make their businesses more efficient.
Yeah.
So, it's like, I mean, we can get AI to write our investment memos now and like, to like 80% of where we need to get them to. Just like simple processes that you couldn't automate before, you can automate now. And so I think it will cost a lot less to start businesses or to scale businesses. And so I do think it is important for everyone to understand and start to use these products because they're only going to get better and better. And the companies that are not using them are going to be at a disadvantage than the ones that are using them.
But are you talking about using AI that exists already, like somebody else, like ChatGPT or whatever? Or these companies need to have,
Their own?
um,
No, no, no. You're using the exist. You can build a competitive advantage with the tools that are out there today.
or
But
okay, so you don't have,
knowing that they're going to continue to get better.
right.
I mean, and it's from simple things like taking notes and summarizing those notes. Like, that's a pretty simple, but also takes a lot of time that's already off, already taken off people's plates, to other things that are much more value add from a process perspective.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
it's
look, like so, like generally, women are there are fewer women engineers than not. Like right now, you can code an app without writing a line of code,
right.
or you can build an app without writing a line of code. And I think that will start to democratize the ability to build some of these businesses.
It's so crazy, right? Because I was just reading about that article about how Gen X and everybody in creative industries, from photographers to graphics, et cetera, it's like, don't really, there's like everything's replacing them. And now you think something like engineering, right, could be completely replaced by AI. And so this massive advantage that a lot of men with ironic t-shirts and hoodies had for a long time, you know, could be completely democratized as well. Because we hear about the bad side of AI, right, being fed by, you know, only one gender and completely swayed. I never thought about that.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's interesting. I am meeting an undergrad and next week who has a major in AI,
Yeah.
which, I mean, I didn't even know was possible.
Yeah.
So, and that's in the, computer science vertical at their school, which is crazy.
So when you're talking to women and giving advice to women about like the future and how we can, if you're going to only have 2% of capital and hopefully it'll goes up, how do you grab that? What sets you apart? Is it making sure you're having like AI as part of it? Doesn't matter if you're a product, doesn't matter whatever.
Um,
What do you see the mistakes they're making in ways that they can really stand out?
I'm going to step back a little bit. I think there's two things. One is, ultimately we have to play the game that's on the field. And this is, we can complain about it or we can say it's unfair, but we have to figure out how to break through this.
Right.
So that's number one. And have that idea that, like, I'm probably going to have to work at least 50% harder to get through this. The second is not worrying about what other people are doing. I have so many people like, well, so and so raised this amount, so I should raise this amount. And it's like, well, you might not have access to that amount. Like, why don't you raise less and put some runs on the board and then go out again? And so thinking about it that way and not comparing yourself to others, which, by the way, raising big amounts of capital is not always good either, and has a lot of bad behavior around that too. So that's the second. And then the third is, like, think big. Like, a lot of these businesses that women are creating are big, but they they may not position them in the same way, and also get help. A lot of women do a lot of things themselves and they're not building their team. And this is, you cannot do everything yourself, especially if you're the CEO. You need to start, as you start to scale, you need to start handing off, um, and get people who hopefully can do these things better than you, that you're holding the vision of the business. And, we like to say that, and I used to work with another venture capitalist who would say there's three things that a CEO should do, and this is a founder. It's to hold the vision of the business, keep the company capitalized, and retain and recruit. And, like, thinking about those three things of how you scale is super important.
What was the last one? Retain what?
Hire and retain.
Hire and retain. Yeah. I mean, you got to know that, like, when you start the business, you might not be the best person to be running it in a certain period of time, and you're going to need to step aside.
Yeah, or you're like, look, you're the founder and you're the vision of the business and you were the first product person, you were the first head of sales, but there are people who've been doing this their whole lives that can come and partner with you on that. And now
Yeah.
you have the ability to be out there either evangelizing your company or raising capital or making sure the best people are coming into your company. And that's what you should be spending your time on over time.
One more question. When people are starting these businesses, I know another thing that happens is everyone wants to hold on to their equity, right? And I get that because you don't want to get diluted, et cetera. But what are you seeing in the trend? It's like, should people be giving equity? Should they hold on to it? Like,
You
you
mean
know,
to investors or employers? I mean,
no,
employees.
like people who work with you. Like, at what point are you giving equity to employees?
I think it depends on their roles. In in the building stages, I think the only way you can recruit is to give people equity because you obviously can't pay them market. And so that has that is probably the trade. But as you get bigger and your company becomes more valuable, you're giving less for the same role, you're giving less and less, right? So if you have someone who's a CTO who comes in right when you're starting the business, that's very different than, 5 years in when you might have 10 million of revenue or, 20
Right.
million of revenue, right?
Right. So that, I mean, that kind of goes back to the point of like, you can't do everything. So you can't hold on to everything. Like if you really, if you really want help and you want to grow faster, then bring in those people and give them some equity.
Yeah.
Right.
The other trap I see is that, oh, I don't want to raise that much capital because I don't want to take the dilution. And the thing I emphasize with the founders I work with is you have to raise enough capital to get to a milestone that you can raise more capital. If you have to try to do it in the middle, that is the hardest type of fundraise that you can do, because everyone wants to see it at, like, oh, if a series B is somewhere between 5 and 10 million in revenue, they want to see that 5 or 10 million in revenue, not like I'm getting there, right? Or series A, 3 years ago, you could raise a series A with $1 million of revenue or approaching a million. Now, if you don't have 2 or 3 plus, that's a very hard thing to do.
And that changed so much. Like who makes those determinations that that's going to change, you know? It's like,
Is what the market would bear. It's everything. Anything is only valued what the market will pay for it. And I think the evaluations got too loose in 2021, 22, and people are just excited about growth. And so instead of saying like, oh, this is, these are seed metrics, they, created this situation where they ended up being series A metrics. So we're actually going back to what it used to be.
okay, so it started like that, then got a little crazy because everyone's like, "Oh, every company that starts is the next Uber," and whatever. And now you're like, "Oh, and by the way, maybe profits could be a nice thing to have instead of like $1 billion company that's
Yeah,
never
or
made
a
a
semblance
dollar."
of it will happen at some time.
Yeah, exactly. Right, because you do have the I mean, isn't that part of it? It's like you had all of these companies that had a ton of revenue. The founders and people were, taking money off the table, but real investors are their employees that were there forever and never got a dime because they never made any profits.
Yeah, the taking money off the table is a whole another discussion.
Oh my God. Is
Yeah.
that not like short? Give me the short version.
The
I know
short
you.
version is, like, I think it makes sense for a founder, they've been working on these companies for a long time and they probably haven't been paying themselves or paying themselves very little, to take some money off the table to either like buy a house or put their kids through school or something. But when it starts to be, you know, 5, 10, 15, $20 million and sometimes more, the incentives are not aligned anymore, because they've already made money on this business
Mhm.
versus all of their employees, especially, and then their investors as well. So yeah, it's become an expectation, but it does change the dynamic.
And do they have to get approval from all the investors in order to take that money off the table?
So how it typically happens is it's usually board approval, and usually it's because it usually happens when an investor comes in and is trying to win the deal, and so they do that in order to sweeten the deal for the founders in order to pick them.
Mm.
And then of course now, that it puts the board in a situation where they don't want to blow up a deal where they're going to get a lot of capital into the company. And so that's how it typically happens.
Love it. It's a game. It's like poker, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah,
Yeah, but things change. I was at two companies where founders took capital off the table, and people see it.
yeah, and they
Yeah.
don't love it usually.
Mm-hmm.
Super soon. So look, it's like we've talked about a lot of things that are not great right now for female founders in particular. What's some positive like outlook here from Beth Ferreira on what women we think is going to happen?
Look, at the end of the day, there's not going to be more capital being put behind women until there's a lot of success and that people feel like they're missing something by not putting capital behind these people. Um, and the positive is that we have a lot of really good companies in the market right now that are doing really well. And when the IPO market opens, I suspect we'll have not just one or two, but many IPOs that will be sort of it won't be just like Stitch Fix and the real. It will be we'll have a longer list of companies and people will say like, oh wait, I saw that company and I should have been in that company.
I love it. Was there one company that you like regret not investing in?
Oh my God, there's so many.
That you want to admit?
It's there's two things. There's the situation where either you just made the wrong decision. There's the situation where you couldn't convince your partners or you didn't want to use as much political capital to get it over the finish line. Or that the one that's hardest is you picked it, but you couldn't get in it. Yeah. It's like winning, it's like you can pick, but you got to win. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's what's exciting about being at Serena Ventures is that, we have an outsized advantage to squeeze into stuff.
Yeah. Famous people, that'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I love it. So many little pearls of wisdom here. Great. I love it. I cannot wait. When is this IPO market going to open?
Oh God. Well, if it continues this way, it's going to be a long time. So
I
hopefully
can't
things will
wait. Then
change.
good. Let's all like line them up. So when the IPO market opens, it's just one female founded company after the next. You heard it first, ladies, from Beth Ferreira. Get ready for that IPO market. Oh my God, I love it. All right. Well, one thing hasn't changed since that hundreds of thousands of downloads ago. And that is the one question we still always ask all of our guests is what is the worst advice you've ever received?
Well, there's been a lot, but I would say the biggest and most impactful is taking the advice that you need to do. You need to stay in a situation that's not great for you, and because there's external factors of what success looks like, what your position or status in the market is, and that's there's like these artificial marks of success. Like ultimately we all decide what our success metrics. We should be the decider of our success metrics, not some outside construct. And it's really hard to make those tough decisions. And so be careful on who you take advice from, especially if they've been long-term mentors.
Yeah. So true. And especially if they've never walked in your shoes, in particular as a woman in business, right? It's so much easier for a man to give a man advice, you know?
Yeah,
But they
it's
don't know what it's
completely
like.
different. They don't understand the dynamics, and even I would say even the most woke men, they still can't because they've never seen it before. They haven't.
Yeah.
They're just imagining what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I also say that, I mean, look, you want to surround yourself with people that will help you and, be sounding boards, but also be cognizant of, you might outgrow your mentors or you might, yeah, I don't want to say break up with them, but like you might outgrow. And so you be constantly looking for those people. It's not just the person who might have been, super supportive when you were 25.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. Thank you so much. Now, if people want to find Serena Ventures and you, how do they do that?
We're at serenaventures.com. And I am at Beth at serenaventures.com.
Oh,
So if you have a
amazing.
company, please send it.
If you're there to help the everyday person, head on over to Beth. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of Taking Care of Lady Business. And until next time, I'm Jennifer Justice. Oh. Thanks for tuning in to Taking Care of Lady Business. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode with a friend who needs that extra push to own their success. And if you want more strategies, stories, and exclusive content, follow us on TikTok at Taking Care of Lady Business, on Instagram at thejustice.dept and Jennifer Justice L, or visit our website at thejusticedept.com. Taking Care of Lady Business is a production of Lady Business LLC and Salutations Media Co.